Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webdelics Podcast, where we're on a journey to find out the truth about psychedelics and plant medicine, get rid of the myths, and change the narrative. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and with us today is a very interesting guest, Dr. Jonathan Fields. Now, this is a topic that I never imagined we'd be talking about when I signed up to be the host of the Webdelics Podcast, but here we are. Before I reveal what that topic is and we get into it, Jonathan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you for the lovely intro, Scott. A little about me. My doctorate and my master's degree are both in acupuncture and Eastern medicine. So I'm a board-certified herbalist, board-certified acupuncture, biomedicine, and traditional Eastern medicine. Outside of that, my bachelor's previous to that was health sciences. I own 2 clinics in the South Florida area. One's in Boca Raton. It's called Create Health. It's CR8 Health. And another one in the Coral Springs area, which is integrative medicine. We're looking at scaling both those operations right now. They're doing very well. We've helped thousands of people over the last few years with functional medicine, acupuncture. We do hormones, weight loss, aesthetics, IV drips, vitamin injections, all that kind of stuff. And outside of that, on the psychedelic end, I speak at a lot of the conferences. I'm frequently speaking at different events and different universities here in the South Florida area on the topic. And I was actually one of the clinicians who petitioned the DEA for the right to try laws. And that went to the 9th District Court that I'd be happy to talk to about that a little bit more later.
And everything that you just said goes as to one of the fundamentals of the Webdelics Podcast, which is making sure that the guests we have are credible, knowledgeable, and recognized as actual experts in the field, not just my random homeboy down the street who may have gone on a journey or two. There's some other things I've just got to say about you, Jonathan, because I'm excited about this episode, and some of it's because of the person you are. Is that true?
Yeah, so I grew up, I was a DJ for a long time. I DJ'd for over 20 years. So, and I got started with EDM, and freestyle kind of was one of those things. I'm down in Florida, Miami. We had huge Latin, New York population here. So freestyle is part of our culture.
And, I DJ'd all through college and law school too, actually. So we probably have a little bit of ear damage from that, but I ain't telling anybody about that. And then is it true you also have some martial arts in your background?
That's actually how I got into the Eastern medicine. I've been in martial arts most of my life. I started as a young kid with karate and taekwondo. I got back into it around 2004 with my teacher now at a system called Lost Legacy Systems. It's a mixed martial arts system. My teacher, Phoenix LeGrand, is a guy from Brooklyn. He's got a bunch of different black belts and different styles. But mostly we were doing Japanese jiu-jitsu and judo and striking. I did about 10 plus years of that. And the last 8-9 years been more kung fu, Wing Chun, Tai Chi, some Shaolin martial arts, Shaolin Kung Fu.
Well,
and a lot of Qigong.
Well, I've just got to say, after hearing all that, just make sure that if I start arguing with you about something, you resort intellectually. I don't want a karate chop to break my jaw, because then I won't be able to talk anymore.
Us.
You stone cold busted me. Now, on the topic of martial arts and wellness that you just hinted at, the topic of today's conversation is holistic wellness. How physical health, mental health, and psychedelics all work together to heal the various sicknesses that are afflicting us, both as a society and as individuals. Really important topic. In this show so far, we have had extensive, and I gotta say, fascinating discussions about a whole host of issues related to mental health issues like trauma, addiction, emotional pain, abuse, as well as broader social evils like racism, poverty, and the opioid crisis. And they are a lot of what is illing us as a culture. But I'll just throw this out here. These mental ailments aren't the only ailments that are afflicting Western society severely. There are physical ailments that are eating away at us, if not as badly, perhaps even more badly. But as a functional medicine expert, as someone with gut health in his background, I suspect you have a thing or two to say about that too. So maybe I'll just let you start talking.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you brought up all these different points. And if you look at the statistics, 60% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. Many of them have more than one. 40% of Americans are obese or overweight, and 20% of us suffer from mental health issues. So if you add all those combined, you're talking about almost the entire country, right? And obviously they overlap a lot, right? You might have chronic diseases and obesity and mental health issues. So overall, we are a pretty sick nation. We've got no shortage of ailments that are bothering us. And the sad thing is, if you look at all the leading causes of death, as well as mental health, most of it is actually preventable.
And what does that say? Because something is keeping us from preventing. What is that about, in your opinion?
Well, the system is broken. I think we all know it. The medical system is broken. The education system is broken. And our attitudes are broken. Part of it is we don't want to take personal accountability. Part of it is we want the easy fix. We want the pill. We want to eat what we want to eat when we want to, right? We don't have the self-discipline that maybe our grandparents or great-grandparents had. We haven't had the struggles that they've had. Not that we don't have our own personal struggles, but times are different. We do, most of us in this country have it easier than our grandparents did, right? Or great-grandparents or generations before then. So I think part of it is we got soft, and part of it is we've been lied to and programmed and brainwashed by the media and the medical system, thinking that you can just eat whatever you want. The food on the shelf is safe, and you don't need to have any self-control. And if you do get sick, your doctor is going to solve all your problems magically with one pill or 5 or 10 or 20.
In an earlier episode with a guest by the name of Talia Eisenberg, we touched on a similar topic. I told her then, and it's something I've been uncomfortable with sharing, but I do feel compelled to be honest with the audience here so that they get an honest picture of the psychedelic and plant medicine world, and they can have that sense of trust. I was afflicted with body dysmorphia issues for much of my childhood, teenage years, and early adulthood, and I responded to that by weightlifting in this extreme way. So I just got massively huge, and I was eating and eating and eating, and I ended up diabetic. And my doctor told me that I was 2 to 5 years from losing my right leg. I'll never forget this. He prescribed me all these pills. I said, I don't want them. And he said, well, yeah, basically, everyone says they don't want to take pills, but you have to take responsibility for your life and your health. No one does. I don't believe you will. So here's your pill. And for a while, I didn't, until those words really sunk in. And I really began to realize these side effects could kill me. Once my leg is gone, I might never have it back. And so thinking about it, though, that illness that I had to take personal responsibility for, that was one of these preventable things that you're talking about, was related to my own trauma. I had a very difficult childhood. I felt oppressed and frightened. I responded by deciding to get as big as possible so no one would beat me up. I ended up on the verge of an amputation. Am I alone here?
No, absolutely not. Everybody has, I think, a legitimate reason. And like I said, part of it is the training and the programming, kind of what we've been taught. And part of that body dysmorphia maybe came from the media or from other things that you were exposed to, or parental stuff. Like, we all have our reasons. I grew up on a farm and left all my friends and family at a young age and came over here to a different country and had to learn English at age 7. And I had a brother that passed away, and but we all have our own traumas. My grandparents were in Auschwitz and started a whole new family. Their entire families were murdered and killed, and had to start my grandfather had to get a new wife and a new children after, being in camps, and go back to his country and then move again to another country. And you know what? We can let that shape us, right? And we can use that and hold on to that story and use that to poison ourselves and treat ourselves like crap. Or we can kind of say, that's it. I'm breaking this generational trauma. I'm breaking this right now, and I want to do better. And I know there's better out there. Unfortunately, much like yourself, people are misled by the doctors, right? As your doctor had been seeing you go through this, they should have given you preventative things to do from the very beginning, instead of just assuming that you're going to be like everybody else and you're not going to do anything about it. He should have said, hey, here are your two options: either diet, take better care of yourself, lay off all the, maybe you're doing too many supplements, too many whatever, right? Or you're going to have your leg amputated, not take these pills or you're going to die, which is how they scare everybody into compliance. And a lot of people, as they seen that you were gaining weight, or as they slowly seen that your blood sugar was rising, that should have been a conversation. The doctor should have been trained on that. It's on top of that, as a medical professional, I am legally obligated to refer out. So if I'm your doctor and if I don't deal with nutrition, and in my case I do, but if I don't deal with nutrition and if it's not my specialty and I see a patient moving in this way, I'm actually morally, ethically, and legally obligated to refer out. Why aren't they referring to a dietitian? Why don't they refer to a personal trainer? Why don't they refer to a nutritionist or a functional medicine doctor? If it's not your specialty, if you see a red flag, that's your job.
It's interesting because when I spoke to my doctor about this during one of several conversations, I basically told him that I strongly suspected that I had body dysmorphia based on what I'd read online. And he just ignored it and was like, here's the prescription for your condition. And you're raising an interesting point. And then that begins to take us back to some of the other conversations we've had about psychedelics. You're right. The pill was the solution, not a referral to someone that could help me with the underlying cause of what I was basically stating I believed that I had. And body image issues have been known to kill people. Now, I also have shared that in order to deal with a lot of the traumas that I faced, as well as the ways they played out, was in counseling for 11 years to bring myself to a place where I was intact. And this goes back to the main thrust of this conversation. What if that doctor had been able to say, or was saying, there are treatments that might be able to help you with whatever was causing your body dysmorphia, that could solve your problem unbelievably quickly and permanently? Do you think lives would be different if that happened? Because I have to say, I think mine would.
100%. There's no question about it. We have, I think, enough science now. We might not have large scale, long term, double blind, randomized controlled trials and all this stuff, but we know from the scientific method, which is you repeat this experiment over and over and over again, and if it works, then that is literally the definition of the scientific method, right? So just because we don't have these published large scale journal studies on humans for a lot of this stuff, it doesn't mean it doesn't work, and it doesn't mean we don't have a long history of this kind of stuff working. We have thousands of years of data. We have case studies. We have medical textbooks from 2,000 years ago that are talking about these different types of things, different types of plant medicines, different types of lifestyle changes that affect physiology. And they've been tested over thousands of years on billions of people. That is the scientific method. It works. There are options, and the doctors are not giving them to people.
It's interesting that you mention all of those ancient texts that have had data around this, because, and I would be curious how this, and if it ties into some of your background also in Eastern medicine. A lot of times those studies or those books, for lack of a better word, are disregarded because they are not they weren't put together following modern Western scientific protocols. And therefore,
Correct.
without those protocols in place, we don't know. One could argue whether really those results were replicable, whether whether they were done in a double-blind way, whether they met modern ethical standards, as well as a whole bunch of other things. And so their reliability, one could argue, is very questionable. So focusing back on Webdelics' theme of making sure that the information we present is credible, what would be your response to objections like that?
I'm glad that you brought it up. One, it is replicable. And like I said, that is literally the definition of the scientific method. You repeat it again and again and again, and you get the same results. Sure, it wasn't all tracked, in the hospital case, but a lot of this stuff has been replicated. Two, the reason it's not getting put into the current format of what we would consider the gold standard of science is because who's going to invest $1 billion to study something that you can't patent, right? And three, if it did work, right, there'd be a lot of money being lost to other industries. That it's actually a potential danger to these industries. It could put a lot of people out of business or upset a lot of shareholders. So some of this stuff is intentionally being withheld from us. But more importantly, to your point, that is actually not the definition of evidence-based medicine. If you look at the evidence-based medicine definition, what it is, you're taking the best quality available research and the clinician's clinical experience and the hopes and expectations of the patient. And that's what actually defines evidence-based medicine, not some RCT double-blind clinical trial. So that's a common misconception. And if anybody would like to argue that, they can look it up. This is not my opinion. This is just how we define medicine.
Hopes and expectations of the patients is something that I personally, when reading the sort of media accounts that other folks out there like me who are just more or less Jane Does or Joe Blows, looking to find out more information about psychedelics. That's not necessarily something that you read a lot when the scientific literature is discussed. And one of the things that is potentially good or potentially bad about highlighting the relationship of patient expectations to what is evidence-based validation of psychedelics effectiveness or not is whether those expectations and hopes are reasonable in the first place. How do we, as people that are attempting to assess whether psychedelics might be right for us or might be right for someone that we know or care about, or simply whether we want to vote, like let's say there's some ballot initiative in our state as to whether psychedelics should be decriminalized or not, how do we know how to set these expectations?
Well, it's a good point. And once again, there is no one medicine or one psychedelic or one treatment methodology that's going to work for everybody. Two, as far as setting expectations and just that whole thing in general, we know that placebo is real, right? So there is some sort of placebo effect in any method, even surgery. There's an element of placebo involved in surgery or medications as well. So that helps guide and shift that. When you're talking about psychedelics specifically, we have a few right now that actually are in phase 3 or going into phase 3 clinical trials, right? Like MDMA and psilocybin's going into a large phase 3 clinical trial. MDMA, I believe, is finishing up. MAPS is finishing up their phase 3 clinical trials. It might even be available to the public next year, right? Ketamine's been used for quite some time now. It's an anesthetic, but it's been used for mental health issues and pain management now for quite a while as well. And there is plenty of data and there is plenty of research on it, and it's published. I mean, you could find this stuff coming out of Stanford, right? Harvard, MIT, all these big organizations are doing this kind of Johns Hopkins, right? They all have psychedelic programs. They all have alternative medicine. They all have acupuncture programs. They're all studying all this kind of mind-body kind of stuff. They all have programs for this. Every major educational institution in this country and most of them around the world are studying this stuff, and there is data that is out there and you can find it. It is publicly available.
Psychedelics, as many guests on this show have pointed out, and as you're indicating, can have tremendous effect on the mental state of people who are suffering. Yet, many of the individuals I've spoken to since beginning this journey have made it clear that when you are stepping into a psychedelic journey, it's important to eat clean, to shape up your diet, to not be walking in there having just had 15 bags of Doritos and some Ho-Hos and maybe some KFC. Oh, by the way, KFC, if you've heard this, I love you, but I don't know if you need to be eaten immediately before an ayahuasca journey. At least that's the impression I've gotten. Do you agree that in order to optimize a psychedelic experience, that sort of dietary cleansing, for lack of a better word, needs to take place? And it may seem like it's an obvious yes or no, but I'm actually asking this for a reason we'll get to in a minute.
So 100% yes. And before I get into that, I will advise that everything, the answers I'm providing here are for education and entertainment-based purposes. But yes, definitely. And Scott, I think this is great what you're doing with Webdelics and informing people on psychedelics and the process and setting and integration. But the dieta has always been a diet basically has always been a part of the ritualistic ceremonies of psychedelics since the beginning of times, right? Any indigenous culture that was using these kinds of substances for religious and spiritual awakening and for medicine, they would usually fast. They would do these kinds of things. They would eat clean. On top of that, what makes it even more important from both an Eastern medicine and functional medicine standpoint, it's always a food first approach. A lot of our mental health problems, not all of them, but for many of us, can actually be fixed by fixing your gut health, right? Your gut actually has more neuron connections with, there's hundreds of millions of connections between your gut and your brain, and there's way more connections going to the brain than there are coming from the brain to the gut. So that tells us the gut is sending a lot of information to the brain, as well as 90+% of the serotonin being produced is in the gut. Now, there is separate serotonin that functions individually in the brain as well, but your mental health is linked to your gut health. You cannot remove the two. So if you're going to pretend to use medicine and you're not willing to do the work to get you there all the way, or you're not willing to do the integration that's necessary with it, whether it be therapy or other, mantras or exercise or sun gazing or grounding, these other kind of things that will also have been shown clinically to improve your mental health. If you're not willing to try, don't bother doing the medicine because you're not going to have good results. And it might even increase, some of these negative habits that you have, right? So you need to be going in with an open mind. I mean, you can have a bad trip or a bad journey, right? And you can actually cement some of these terrible habits that are contributing to your mental health problems. So you need to at least start by cleansing, getting all that junk out of your system, detoxifying, then let your mind work. And then as the psychedelics go to work in your brain and kind of, help rewire and increase neuroplasticity and turn off that default mode network that allows you to have these obsessive negative thoughts over and over, then you could begin to reprogram. But if you're not in a stage where your body is clean and prepared for it, and the psychedelics only help you get there, they're part of the journey. They're not the destination.
There is a little nugget in what you said that I feel compelled to extract. It's a little bit of a little bit of a digression from what I was going to get to, but hey, I can't let this go. Which is the idea that if you have not taken in the appropriate food, or if you have not taken the appropriate dietary steps in order to make sure that your physiological state walking into the journey is in the right place, you could end up having not only a bad trip, but cement these dangerous
100%.
habits. I raise this because it's important for us here at Webdelics, not just to mindlessly rah-rah. I had enough cheerleading when I was in high school. I wasn't a cheerleader, but I had to endure these routines watching them. I don't need any more in life, and I know a lot of people don't need any more in life. We need truth. And so what you're saying is that, well, there are all of these hyped up possibilities that plant medicines represent, but this is a real risk. If you want to get better and you haven't taken the dietary steps to make sure that you're positioned to do that, you could actually end up worse because you might be intractably stuck in these bad habits.
Well, you're trying to trade one drug for another. And that's not how it works, right? The psychedelic experience is meant to kind of show you what you need to do. It is not what you need to do. It's just to help guide you and get you to that path and allow you to drop those bad habits and give you a window of time where your brain is working in different ways and more connected. And now it's like, okay, I did the psychedelics. I had all these thoughts. But after the journey, now is my chance to fix my core problems, to get to the root cause of my health issues. And if you have leaky gut or what we would call intestinal permeability, and everything you eat is slipping out of your intestines into your blood supply and causing these autoimmune reactions and chronic inflammation, right? Or if you have mold toxicity, or if you're anemic, right? Or a million other, if your blood sugar is out of control up and down because of whether you're skipping meals or eating sweets, or if your blood sugar is too low, right, you're not going to have good health, good mental health or physical health, and psychedelics will not help you. They're not going to help you. You need to take personal accountability.
That is an important caution. And though it does raise a little bit of a conundrum, which was actually going back to where the original line of questioning was going, which is if our physical health and our mental health are tied together. And in fact, the physical ills that are preventable and that many people face are merely expressions of these deeper mental problems.
Right.
Then it causes a conundrum for those who might want to have psychedelics benefit them in resolving these mental health issues. Because if you have to be in a place of certain physiological health and you can't get there because the mental issues are driving you into deeper and deeper physiological danger, then how can you conceivably access the psychedelics in order to deal with the underlying problem? It's almost like you're caught in a loop that keeps you outside of accessibility of psychedelics as a treatment modality for you.
Well, that applies to every treatment modality, and you're correct. It's those negative feedback loops and those default mode networks, the obsessive negative thoughts where we keep punishing ourselves for our past things, right? Our past traumas, that we kind of keep indulging in these negative behaviors, which most of the time we know are bad for us.
Yeah.
You know, we know, right? Junk food is bad for us, but we can't stop. Not only because the chemicals in there are specifically designed to be physically addictive, but because we're using our story and our trauma as an excuse to continue to perpetuate that crime against our own bodies, right? But it's a good point, and that's why I'm on Webdelics with Scott Mason today, is because I have been speaking at these conferences, and I have seen how opportunistic and how capitalistic the industry and the market is becoming, right? And there is a boom of venture capital money, and everybody wants to make $1 billion on discovering the new drug or patenting the new psychedelic or opening a treatment center. And I kind of just watched this for a little while, and I said, you know, this is hugely irresponsible to completely ignore all the underlying root causes of people's issues and just be like, buy our drugs, come to my clinic, come to my facility. And it's the same thing even if I do treatments for people. If I'm going to just, okay, I'm going to give you acupuncture, but if I don't talk to you about your diet, or we don't fix, like I said, if you're anemic or whatever the issue may be, if I don't fix that, it's not, it's disingenuous on my part, and it might be a way for me to just keep you hooked as a patient or a client and keep taking your money, but you're not actually going to get long-term lasting results, and we're not going to see a change in public health that way. We're not going to see a revolution in this mental health crisis like everybody who's in a psychedelics is proclaiming we're going to have if it's just focused on the business and selling a new class of drug. That's not going to do it. And that's where I've been coming in, and I have a startup in the space, and that's what we do in the clinic on a day-to-day basis, is try to prep people, not necessarily just for psychedelic, but prep people's bodies, minds, and spirit, and reunify the body, mind, and spirit so they can make better decisions and understand that they need to take personal accountability, and they're not going to get better if they refuse to do so.
In light of the fact that culturally, many people, specifically being me, but I know I'm not the only person who thinks that this way. Many people believe that we are not trained to take responsibility for our actions. Let's just look at the political sphere. How many politicians say, you, my dear voter, are responsible for the pickle that we're in? If you didn't insist that I do X, Y, Z, or if you didn't vote against a politician that did something that would hold you accountable, well, maybe we'd actually be able to fix the situation rather than continually just pointing fingers at out groups or the other party or whoever we might be blaming. And that's just in politics. For psychedelics to be mainstream in any way, I'm also hearing that there needs to be a complete social shift in how we as a people discuss accountability. A, do you agree with me? B, do you think that's even possible?
A and B. Yes, I think it's possible, but unfortunately, looking at the numbers right now, as much of an optimist as I am, it is frightening to look at the data and to see the percentage of the population that's affected by these issues. And for me, when I'm in the clinic, I might see 20 to 30 patients a day to see how the overwhelming majority of people are still stuck in that mindset. Like they come, you fix me, right? And what you're saying is it's not, it's not tied to politics or anything else. It's just basic human nature, right? And that's why we get stuck in these obsessive negative thoughts. And that's why our default mode network functions the way it does. Because if you look at evolution, right, we had to be fear-based, right? Because if we weren't on our guard all the time, a saber-toothed tiger might eat us or whatever was the case, or some bandits might get us, right? And while our lives might be a little more cushy today, we still are susceptible to the fear-based thoughts, right? The majority of our thoughts, they say about 70% of our thoughts naturally are just negative thoughts. And we can sit there and ruminate on that same thing over and over and over. And that's how we punish ourselves. And that's how we destroy the health of our cells using our mind, right? And that's why we have to learn to reprogram. So it's a combination of all these things. And it takes a little bit of work. The good news is it's not actually that hard. Do you have to commit? Yes. Do you need to make some changes? Yes. But people are like always, it's hard. It's hard. What's hard about it? No, it's not. If I tell you I need you to do 2 minutes of breathing exercises a day, 2 minutes, you can do it. If I say you can do 3 minutes, 5 minutes of exercise a day, you can do it. If I tell you slowly, we're going to clean up your diet, and instead of eating cake every day, you're going to have more fruit, you're still going to get your sugar fix, and you're going to feel better because you're going to have vitamins, minerals, you're going to have macronutrients that come along with that. You're going to feel better. And when you feel better, you're going to want to continue to feel better. You're going to want to follow down the path. So it's not hard. I think people just need to lift the veil and get out of I can't and it's hard and be willing to, I will do whatever it takes to survive, because otherwise you're going to die a miserable, horrible, disease-ridden death and suffer for many years of your life. And that's just the fact. Those are cold, hard facts. That's the reality. If you look at the average American, they're on medications. Like I said, they have these chronic diseases, obesity, mental health issues. And whether it comes to metabolic disease, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cholesterol, most of these things are known to even certain cancers. They're known that it's science. It's preventable.
The passion that you express when you're talking about all this, it really affects me, Jonathan. How did you come to get involved in psychedelics and plant medicines from this particular perspective?
Great question. And I appreciate it, Scott. So I'll tell you a little bit first about my health journey, and then I'll kind of go back and talk about the psychedelics, because that should give you a little bit more of about the how I got into this whole field in general. Basically, I grew up in martial arts. I was pretty healthy in my early 20s. I noticed I was getting a little bit of a belly. I did because I was eating, 14-ounce steaks at 2 a.m., right? And I was into working out, but I didn't like it. So I started cleaning up my diet. And around 2003, 2004, I met my Qigong master, Dr. George Love, and he introduced me to, juice fasting and vegan diets and all these kinds of stuff. And I just found it fascinating. And through that, in the martial arts, I really enjoyed the physical activity. I enjoyed the camaraderie with the other martial artists. I enjoyed being competitive, even though I wasn't out competing in tournaments. Although I have trained other professional fighters and amateur fighters. Personally, I didn't feel the need to compete like that, but I was always up for it in the dojo or visiting other people's dojos, right? And then in my early 30s, I was probably about 31, 32. I had just lost my brother a year before that. We were going through or about to go through the recession, right, in 2007, 2008, around that time, and lost my business, lost everything, became super depressed. I was overtraining. My work was on a computer before that, so I was spending 12, 14 hours, maybe more a day on a computer. Even though I was exercising, just the two wasn't working. I was overtraining and spending too much time sedentary. I tried to go vegan a couple times. That didn't work for me. And between that and losing my brother in the business and losing my girlfriend at the time and everything, I got to a state where I was disabled. I was extremely, extremely sick. I'm in my early 30s. Whoa. I was having hot flashes, chills, chronic fatigue, severe depression. I'm talking about I was sleeping 12, 13 hours a day. I'd get out of bed 2 hours later. I was tired again.
Whoa.
And I'm the type of guy, I sleep probably 4 to 5 hours a night. I don't drink coffee. I don't eat sugar. I don't need any stimulants. I'm always energetic. I pop right out of bed. I'm ready to go. And I had kind of devolved to this. On top of that, I had systemic joint pain. Every joint in my entire body was hurting.
God.
I had carpal tunnel so bad, I was losing my grip strength. I could barely hold a cup of water.
What?
I couldn't even shake your hand. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my hands burning and numb and shake them out and pushing them around. I had tendonitis. I had my back and my neck pain was so extreme. I physically could not sit in a chair and I couldn't use a computer. 5 minutes in a chair, my back and neck were on fire. My hands would literally lock up in this position and I couldn't move them, right? And I spent a whole year going to specialists and doctors. I saw 3 neurologists, 2 different hand surgeons that wanted to operate. I never did it. I saw endocrinologists a couple times, did biopsies on my thyroid, which is not fun procedure, ran a bunch of tests, EMGs, a couple different primaries, a couple different orthopedic doctors, and they all told me it's all in your head. Here's some muscle relaxers. Here's some pain pills. Go home and die was basically the message that I got. I didn't like that. I knew better. I went through that, the experimenting as a kid. I had seen, at that point, the opioid crisis was in full effect. I've probably had 30, 40 people that I went to high school with that are no longer with us.
Whoa, wait a minute. 30 to 40 people?
At least. Yeah, I went to a big high school. We had about 3,500 students, and at least 30 or 40 that I grew up with are now gone due to opioids.
Oh, my God.
So I knew better than the muscle relaxers and pain pills. I think I tried one muscle relaxer, and I didn't feel good, and I was like, it wasn't even the point that it wasn't. I mean, I just knew, I was like, there's no chance this is going to help me improve. Even if it helps my pain right now, I was like, there's 0% chance this is going to make my problem better. Not doing it. Okay. And I had tried the acupuncture. Like I said, I tried to go vegan. All these things weren't working for me. And I walked into my friend's vitamin shop, and he's a formulary by the name of Reed Eckert. He's been in the industry close to 40 years. He actually works with MDs to invent vitamins. And I walked in, and I've known him since high school. We used to go there for just protein and whatever. And I walked in his shop one day, and the second I walked in, the first thing he says to me is like, "You look like shit." So I tell him the whole story, and he tells me, "You know what? I know what's wrong with you. I'm going to fix your problem. You're healthy, and you're going to be fine." And I don't believe him, because I'm like, you sell retail vitamins, you sit here in shorts and sneakers, and a dozen doctors and specialists couldn't help me. What the F are you going to do? Right. So, but I had nothing to lose at that point. I mean, honestly, I was probably this close to checking out. Life was getting worse and worse progressively. I thought for sure I had cancer or some other kind of chronic disease that was just undiagnosed. I didn't think I was going to make it, and my quality of life was so low. And even my family, they were like, "We're sick of hearing it. The doctor said you're fine. You're fine. Go home. Go back to work." Basically, that's the support system I had, and that's probably what most of us chronically sick people in the country or the world kind of go through, especially when it's undiagnosed, which happens to a lot of us, right? So he puts me on some stuff, and within 2 weeks, no more hot flashes, no more chills, no more fatigue, no more depression, gone. After a year plus of suffering, all right? He puts me with a good chiropractor, Paul Grillo, who's no longer practicing, but also I credit him with helping pretty much turn my life around. And he discovered that I had these ridiculous knots all throughout my arms, it wasn't really carpal tunnel. My carpal tunnel was actually fine. I had these massive knots. He said the worst he'd ever seen in any athlete from all the martial arts, from smashing our wrists together in palms and just not working them out, that were basically all the way from my wrist, all the way through my biceps, triceps, forearms, all the way up the shoulder and the neck. My scalenus muscles used to get locked up too. And that was compressing the nerves, which was causing me to have carpal tunnel-like symptoms, even though I did not have carpal tunnel. He helped me with that. They had me change my diet. They had me do a bunch of this stuff. And I had already been studying acupuncture with my mentor, Dr. Love, for years, for probably 10 years at that point. And I was teaching his seminars for him and interning at his clinic. And I was always fascinated. But having lived this experience myself and made a full recovery, I could now empathize and understand what it's like to be sick. You know, when you're in your 20s, early 30s, most people just don't get it. And a lot of these doctors, if they've never had a chronic disease, or if their family members have never been chronically ill for no apparent reason other than something that's self-inflicted, like diet or otherwise, they just don't have compassion. They barely make eye contact. They look at you for 2 seconds. Here's your script. So after having lived that, it was like a message from above, from the heavens. Like, I knew I had one option. Now was my time to actually make not only the lifestyle change, but a whole career change. Get off the computer, go back to school, and help other people in my shoes. If I could overcome it, just like you overcame it, Scott, anybody else can do it too. Most people, right? So I went back, did my bachelor's, master's, doctorate. I've trained in China. I've lived with Shaolin monks in the Shaolin temple for months at a time, doing 8 hours a day of Kung Fu and studying medicine with them. And I've interned at hospitals in Beijing and all that. And I'm continuously learning functional medicine and doing seminars and continuing education so I could help other people. As far as psychedelics, I think I first started when I was about 14 years old in high school. I had my first experience with LSD. Somebody was like, "Do you want to try it?" And I was like, "Of course I do." And I had a horrible trip. It was terrible. The setting was bad. The people I was with wasn't great. I actually ended up with almost got robbed at one point, and then ended up at 4 o'clock in the morning having a police officer pull a gun on me and take me and my friend to the police station. And my mom had to pick me up at 4 a.m. So it wasn't a great start to psychedelic experience.
You can say that again.
Yeah. However, it made such an impact, and it was powerful for me. And I think at that point, it was more just like for fun and the experience of learning how to the opposite of what we recommend for people today. It was kind of like learning how to fight the experience. Like, it was, for me, it was like the challenge of like, go as hard as you can and then try to act normal and not let anybody know, how messed up you are, and see if I could have that willpower and that mental strength to basically be able to do that or go to school or do whatever and kind of have these experiences. Although I do think it did help me with some of my depression and some of the it was a big culture shift for me. Like I was born on a farm in Israel. We had 100 houses in the town. Right, I grew up with kids that I was born with, and then I moved to America at age 7, and I had to learn how to speak English. I had to wear shoes. I had to wear underwear. It was a big culture shock.
All those things that are so boring.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Like, why would you want any of that?
Especially the shoes. Come on.
So, I think it helped me kind of work through some of those issues. And I had some depression as a kid. And then I left it alone for about 10 years after high school. After high school, like I had a bunch of friends that were in gangs and like other stuff. And like I said, and just like, right when I got to, my senior year, I was like, I don't want to end up like these guys because they're all going to jail. They're all getting stabbed and shot and doing things that I want no part of. When we were kids, martial arts was fun, fighting was fun, experimenting with substances was fun. But then I was like, you know what? I'm 18 now. I don't want to do any serious jail time. I don't want this kind of life. So I kind of started over, focused more on business. That's why I really dove deep into the music at that point, into the art and the music and the DJing. And I started with EDM and then started producing breakdancing competitions. And now we've been producing them for 26 years. We have our 26th annual event this year. But, and then about 10 years ago, I started seeing the research on the psychedelics. There's been an explosion in the last 8 to 10 years. And at first I was like, oh, that's what we did in high school. And that's what my father did in Miami in the 60s, right? And that's just what all these indigenous cultures have been doing forever. And at first I was just like, oh, that's cool. It's interesting. But then as the more and more and more research came out and the results of the research, if you look statistically, the efficacy and the safety profile of these substances, and when you put that in comparison harm reduction wise versus opioids or SSRIs and the side effects you're having from these other medications, I'm like, clinically, this is a much better option. And then you start hearing the stories from all these people. Yeah. Ketamine saved my life. MDMA saved my marriage. Psilocybin helped save me from suicide, from, my PTSD. And then when you're looking at that and the research, it's like, oh my God. And then I'm in the clinic every day and people are coming in and there's, anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD. And, you know what? I probably have a very high success rate, maybe 70, 80%, sometimes higher. But there's that 20%, 30%, 10% that you try everything and it doesn't work. They deserve more options. They deserve to have access to substances that are plants that have been used for thousands of years and are safe and clinically proven to be effective. Patients deserve that. The American public deserves that. The world, humanity deserves to at least have the option to know that there are alternatives.
Again, your passion speaks as loudly as your story and the facts themselves. There has been a lot that we have covered today. When it comes to my single takeaway, and it's almost impossible to figure out what that single takeaway might be, I have to say it is the importance of understanding that the connection between our physical health, our mental health, and the possibilities that psychedelics present to the world are so interrelated that unless we're considering them all together, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. If there's one takeaway that you would like to share with the audience before we say goodbye for today, what might that be, Jonathan?
Well, one, Scott, I really appreciate you having me on the Webdelics show. And the main takeaway is really is integration. If you're talking about psychedelics and you're thinking about psychedelics, you'll hear this word thrown around a lot. And integration is meaning, right, working on the body, mind, and spirit. You can't fix the mind just with the psychedelics, right? So look for either a coach, whether it be a life coach or somebody who's, whether it be microdosing or a clinic, if you're doing ketamine sessions, where they have some integration, where they have some follow-up, where they have therapy, but also diet, hydration, movement. It doesn't necessarily have to be exercise. You don't have to do CrossFit, but you have to move, right? And from a functional medicine standpoint, the two major things that kind of affect our endocrine system are hormonal balance, which affects our mental health, blood sugar levels, circulation. If your blood sugar levels are up and down, then your emotions are also going to be on a roller coaster. Your mental health is also on a roller coaster. Same thing for your glucose levels. If you're skipping meals or eating too sweet stuff, if you're doing this, don't expect to have a stable mood, right? So take that into consideration. Don't try to shortcut. I guess at the end of the day, you need to integrate, you need to work on body, mind, and spirit. And there's plenty of people that could help, whether it be an acupuncturist or a functional medicine doctor or a holistic health coach, or maybe somebody at the clinic that could kind of point you in the right direction. Most importantly, the single piece of advice I have for people is never give up. And if one experience doesn't work out for you, or if you have a bad trip, or one coach isn't the right fit for you, find somebody else. Do not give up on yourself. Do not let those negative, obsessive thoughts overcome you and eat you up. Every single one of us has the potential to do better. And even if you don't get 100% recovery, there's a lot of room for improvement. All of us have that potential.
Don't give up. What a last word. Jonathan, where can people find out more about you?
Sure. I appreciate it. The best way to find me is probably just at Jonathan M. Fields, JONATHAN, the letter M, like Matthew Fields, FIELDS. If you've looked me up on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, any of those places, just add Jonathan M. Fields. My clinics, one is CR8 Health, C, the letter R, the number 8, health. That's at createhealth.com or on Instagram. And then my other clinic is Integrative Medicine US. So just at iMedicine US. But if you find my name on Insta or LinkedIn, I have links to all that. And I'd be happy to talk. I love making new connections. I appreciate Webdelics and Scott for having me on, because I think it's important that we get this information out there. And I'm happy to share it. I've been lucky enough to have my life saved and the quality of my life saved and be the beneficiary of these kinds of things. And it's my personal responsibility now to share it with you and your audience and everybody's out there who's willing to listen and willing to make some positive changes in their lives.
I'm so glad that willingness is there. For those of you who enjoyed this episode, and I hope that's everybody, we have a lot more coming up, including a really special episode about how to prepare for your first journey. I'm so excited I can barely contain myself. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode and you want to learn more, be sure to subscribe to this podcast either on your favorite audio platform or on YouTube. And by the way, leave a 5-star review or a set of comments if they're on YouTube, because we want to hear from you. Also, make sure that you tell everyone that you know about what we're doing. It might change their lives or the lives of someone that they care about. Also, don't forget to follow Webdelics on our various social media platforms, whether it be LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or on YouTube. Also, if you want more trusted, quality, and objective information about plant medicine and psychedelics, check out our website at webdelics.com. That's webdelics.com. Sign up for our blog, and most importantly, come back again next time for another episode of the Webdelics Podcast.